You are listening to the Tenets on the Kyle Dempster Studios network. To support us, visit patreon.com/Kyle Dempster Studios. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of The Tenets. My name is Kyle, and I'm joined here by my co-host, StarkeRealm. Hello, Stark.
Hey.
How is your Sunday going so far?
Pretty well.
Did you get a lot of time in ESO this weekend?
Yeah, I managed to spend some time clear VAA the other night. It was fun.
Very nice. It is a busy time of year in the Elder Scrolls community. We just got through the Undaunted celebration, which didn't go exactly smoothly, I'd say. I mean, the Dungeon Finder was a bit of a problem. We didn't do a full breakdown or recap of it on the show, mainly because it was a pretty simple event. You know, just ran a random dungeon every day on each character to get a loot box type of thing in-game. We could win pets and mounts and houses from it, but it did not go super smooth. The Dungeon Finder got a little overwhelmed a lot of the time. So we're going to talk about this in a minute, but it ties in. They're going to do some extra stuff for an upcoming event. As of this moment, though, we are in the middle of the free play weekend. We've got a little bit of time left. If you have a friend that might want to try out ESO, now's a perfect time to do it. On all consoles, all platforms, they can log in and play for free. It expires on December 11th. So we're recording this on the 9th. If you're listening to this, you should have all of Monday. We don't know about Tuesday, though, December 11th. That we don't have a time that the event officially expires. So get them in earlier than later because they might hit that kind of wall. Also a reminder that stream team members, people that are streaming on Twitch like myself and we got a lot of others, but we have codes to give out for free games. A lot of people do them as giveaways. So just a reminder, you can head over to Twitch. If you got a friend that's really interested in it, you might be able to win a code for them. So go try and hang out. I know we're giving away those codes right now because we're trying to keep people playing. So if you have a friend and they're interested, come over to the stream, let us know. Might be able to hook you up. In upcoming news, December 22nd, mark your calendars. My stream is pioneering the Trevor Project charity stream. For those that don't know, Trevor Project is an LGBT suicide and crisis awareness group. And we are partnering with Classy Katie, Snowstorm Studios, Luna Rami, Finch Revolution, Gan the Impaler, Fady Lace, and myself. We're all doing charity streams on the 22nd to support this cause. My stream officially starts at 4 p.m. Eastern. All the channels I just mentioned, and I'll put those in the show notes, and you can find information on this on Twitter. We are all having drops enabled for our channel, so it will not be a directory-wide thing for Twitch, but if you go to any of those streams I mentioned, again, Classic Katie, Snowstorm Studios, Luna Rami, Finch Revolution, Gan the Impaler, Fady Lace, we will have drops enabled. I think we're also going to have specific giveaways. I know each streamer's running their own, but I think we're going to have probably giveaway items from Zos, so I'm nailing down the details on that. But just so you guys know, that's probably going to happen. Oh my, let's see, there is a lot here. We got the New Life Festival, Stark. I'm going to let you talk about this for a second, but the event is running December 13th, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern, and it concludes January 2nd at 10 a.m. Eastern. Drops will be enabled for that, starting December 14th at 10 a.m. Eastern, and the drops will conclude December 16th. So the entirety of the event is December 13th to January 2nd, but drops are only enabled for 2 days.
Yeah. The short version of this is you'll go to East March and you'll pick up some quests there. And they're dailies, so you'll do the same 9 quests as often as you want to during the event, like each day. The first time you complete one of them, you are going to get a mysterious reward box that was originally from the Undaunted celebration. So if you missed out on getting rewards out of that because you couldn't queue into dungeons, that's going to be available there then. You're also going to be getting event tickets. It's going to be 1 event ticket each day for the first time you do it daily. And then you can do all 9 dailies on a single character if you want to. You can jump over and do them on different characters. You can do whatever you want with that. There's also going to be a new setup there that we don't have details on, which will reward you. Let me try that again. Reward you with a new skin that can be previewed in-game right now, I believe.
Ooh.
But that will give you the option to look like you are very frosty and, made out of ice. It's pretty cool looking, actually.
That's awesome. Skins are cool. Speaking of getting cool things in game, there's a free pet event going on it started on December 1st, so we're already a little into it. If you have sent any gifts to your friends, you may have already accomplished the guidelines here. But if you're interested in getting the Snowcap Fledgling Griffin pet, all you need to do is send a total of 1,000 crown items to 2 different accounts. So if you send a friend a 500 crown item from the crown store and send another account a 500 crown item from the crown store, that totals your 1,000. And you will be eligible to get the Snowcap Fledgling Griffin. That will be delivered to your account the whole way out on January 4th. So you've got a long time. The event is officially, you have to send these items by January 1st, though. So you have until the new year to send that total of 1,000 crown items. Does that make sense, Stark, the way I said it?
I think so.
There was a lot of confusion people were having.
It's fairly simple, though. Because you just need to send a total of you have to gift stuff, right? Out of the crown store. The total amount you gift has to be at least 1,000 crowns, and you have to gift to at least 2 different players. Yeah. So that's the only catch there. And it's a little bit weird to try to explain it. Because it sounds strange, but it should be pretty simple. If you give stuff to your friends, you're probably going to get this, unless you're very, very tight on the finances when you do that. So it's nope, you only get a crown crate, and you get a crown crate. That's not going to do it. But if you throw a 3rd crown crate at somebody else, you're golden.
Oh wait, is that true? Do we know that for sure?
That it can be over 1,000. Well, it needs to be over 1,000, and it has to be at least 2 accounts.
Okay, so I guess you could throw it on a 3rd account, huh?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you don't have to meet that with the 2.
Moral of the story is take all the money out of your bank account, put it all into crowns, and just send it all to your friends. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Wait, that wasn't... I'm not a financial expert. No. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Zoss would be happy, though. That would be good. Just saying. Wow. So we have a lot of events going on. Like I said, mark your calendars for December 22nd for our charity stream. New Life Festival starts on December 13th, and the free pet is running right now. By the way, you only have one more day to get your friends into the free play weekend, but that is an awesome thing. I like that they do those free play weekends. Very cool.
Well, and if you want it to be more complex, realize that as soon as the New Life Festival starts, you're going to have the ability to buy the final feather and then summon your Indrik as soon as you have 10 tickets. So that's another thing there to keep yourself occupied with. Is the New Life Festival something I don't want to say confusing, but detailed enough for us to do a whole episode on, Stark? If we want to do a run-through of each of the quests, sure. Otherwise, it's fairly straightforward. Let's do a TBD on that, because it will start before our next episode comes out. So you got this one that'll be live on December 9, and then New Life starts this upcoming Thursday. So we'll be 3-4 days into the event by the time we would be able to put up the next episode. But so maybe we'll play with that. I'll see how it plays, and then from a first timer perspective, we'll see if that's a valid episode. And let us know, by the way, you guys, if you want us to do a breakdown of it, feel free to tweet at me or something like that. Let me know. We'd be happy to cover it if you guys want it. Now, this week's episode is talking about crafting part 2. So last week, as a brief recap, we got you guys into the crafting system. If you had never done it before, why you would want to spend the time. Some people coming from other games don't like to do crafting, might think it's just tedious and irrelevant. But as a reminder, the items, the gear you can craft from it, very, very useful. Great stuff in ESO, not just something you're going to throw away right away. We also talked about how to upgrade your gear, how you break stuff down, that it gives you inspiration so you can keep learning more. We covered all of that. And then this week, we want to talk to you guys about the more consumable side of it. So this is us talking about provisioning, alchemy, and enchanting. Stark, let's look at provisioning. You have it first here in our notes. So do you want to kick this one off? Yeah. So provisioning is based around finding recipes. As you play through the game and as you loot containers, you're going to get your hands on various recipes. These will be little green, blue, or purple items that you can consume, and then your character can craft that recipe if they have the passives for it. When you look at it, you should be able to tell immediately if the character will be able to craft it, because the required passes will be listed at the bottom of the item card. And if any of them are in red, you don't have the option to currently. This will let you make food that has either 1, 2, or 3 buffs, depending on the rarity. And it will also give you a level range on the item that will indicate the levels it's appropriate for. As I mentioned last week, when you get to end game, the crafted versions of food will actually be significantly better than the Crown Store purchased ones. So if you got some Crown Store food while you were leveling and you looked at it and was like, well, the stats are really great on this, that's something that the crafted food will actually outstrip eventually. And so across the board, you're better off being able to make your own food or being able to get food that someone else made for you than trying to simply buy it and run that way.
Yeah.
Food and drink buffs are very important for endgame content because we're talking about massive buffs that last a long time. In some cases, like with purple food, you're talking about increasing the total of your stat pools by 9,000 points. That's huge. And then you're also talking about having this buff for 2 hours. So that's your dungeon run.
This gear, gear. These buffs, like you're saying, they're massive. This is something that I think a new player, I don't remember if we've really formally talked so much about using food as buffs. Probably in passing, but I also don't want to make it sound like we have. Provisioning buffs are really big, to the point that when you just started out, I didn't even grasp how much I should be running them until a certain point in the game. And I was like, oh yeah, these are really, really good. It's something the game maybe doesn't stress so much, maybe not as much as it should.
I'm not sure about that. There is an element to the food buffs where the content it matters most for is group content.
Fair.
So you're going to be presented with other players, and sooner or later someone's going to yell at you for not having food on. So that's a thing. You will encounter from other players the need for food. You might not realize it on your own.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's true. Because when you're out just killing things in the wild, you probably are not going to need it. But yeah, doing dungeon content, it can be the make or break between getting one-shotted by something. So very important. And so learning these recipes, it's a great thing to get into. I mean, provisioning is, in my opinion, one of my favorite of the crafting pieces, or crafting, what do we want to call these? How do you differentiate
they're the consumable crafting.
Yeah, probably my favorite of the consumable crafting. The interface is pretty good for this. Which one overhauls this? Which add-on? Is that
Craft Store does. I think Master Recipe does as well. I've seen a couple of different add-ons that actually change the provisioning UI heavily.
Yeah, I think mine must be Craft Store, which we called out last week. And I had some people on Twitter asking for some of those add-ons, by the way. And I'll put a link again to my add-on list in the description below. Craft Store is a great overhaul for the UI for this if you're on PC. It really makes it easy to see what recipes are what. Provisioning, again, does have a furniture side of it. So through the provisioning one, you're often making the wax foods that you'll put through houses. Candles as well are under provisioning. So that's actually what got me to level up my provisioning skills. Go figure that furniture items pushed me into crafting more. But yeah, that's something to get out of there too.
Yeah. Also worth knowing that provisioning. So last week we talked about how you'd have to spend a lot of time researching stuff and how you have to break down a lot of material to level up your equipment crafting skill lines. With provisioning, if you've got the materials on hand, you can max the skill line in about 20 to 30 minutes.
Wow. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Now, it does kind of require you know what you're doing and have some skill points set aside when you go in. But if you're consistently making the highest level foods you can for your current skill level as a provisioner, and you just mash those out, and you have the materials and you get the recipes on hand, so you eat them all, eat all the recipes, level up. You know, you put your points in as fast as possible. As soon as you hit level 20, I believe, in provisioning, you upgrade to the second tier of recipes. As soon as you hit level 30, you upgrade to the third tier. Assuming you're doing this as efficiently as possible, you can do it very quickly and actually make a little bit of money on the side selling the resulting food back to a vendor.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is one of the ones that's really fast and easy to level if you have a plan.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about add-ons more, but Craft Store will help you with that too, because it will let you choose how many of an item you want to craft. So you mentioned mashing a button. If you're someone that likes your add-ons, that will alleviate some of that. Now, could you maybe talk again for a second, Stark? You mentioned it, but this would be a good tip for people just getting into it. What's the rule of thumb when it comes, like, how much of one item do I want to make, kind of, before it starts giving me diminishing returns? You said craft the highest item or the highest level you can do. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Okay, yeah, so sure. So when you're starting out, you'll be able to make potions. Wow, I was going to keep doing that. You'll be able to make food for level 1 through 15. So you can make level 15 food, but you can't make level 20 food. And aside from the level 1, everything is on the 5s. So you can make level 10, you can make level 5, you can make level 15. Once you hit 20 on your provisioning skill line, you'll have the option to buy a passive which will let you make level 20 and 25 food. At that point, you can do that. You can go in, you can make the level 25 food, and you will make significantly more, or earn significantly more XP each time you craft one with that. So in that case, what you're doing is you're actually being efficient with your materials more than anything else. You're trying to burn as few materials as possible while you're leveling the skill line up as quickly as possible. And then when that gets to 30, you'll have the ability to purchase a passive, which will unlock 30 and 35. So you get your 35s. And you make level 35 stuff until you can make level 45. Same system. Once you get to 40, you can make the 40 and 45s if you buy the passive. So you're constantly upgrading this passive as you go. The other passives, like the one that increases the number of items you make each time you craft something, help for making money, but aren't really necessary for this. The other one with this is worth remembering: you can make both food and drinks off the same passive. So when you're gaining the ability to make level 25 food, you're also getting the ability to make level 25 booze. So if you've got a level 25 drink recipe, you can use that instead. And same thing, you can just swap back and forth. It doesn't matter. Once you've gotten to 48 or 50, I forget which, you'll have the ability to buy the last two. And at that point, when you're at 50, you're done. So you don't really have to sit there and spam out the final recipes ever. But getting up there, you can get there very quickly if you are paying attention to what the level of the item is. The one thing I would recommend not doing under all circumstances is do not craft the event recipes. Oh. So when we have events like New Life's coming up, you'll get specific food and drink recipes from these. And they're really good. They're really useful. There are a few that are absolute top tier picks for endgame builds. But they will always be considered a level 1 recipe for the XP you earn when crafting them.
Oh, okay. Yep. That makes sense.
So, yeah, because it will give you XP based on the lowest possible level of the recipe rather than the highest possible.
Well, and I think this is a good one to maybe kind of actually talk about the skills list here for. So I'm going to PM this to you in a sec, Stark, because this is one, the skills I'm looking at for provisioning. Important because when you're a new player and your skill points are really thin, one thing to remember when you're leveling woodworking or clothing or blacksmithing, the first skill when you open up that line is going to be the one that unlocks the higher level items. So that's going to be your different ranks of what you can make. Provisioning swaps the order for some strange reason. So the first skill on your list is going to be recipe quality. That allows you to just do different colors of items. So your standard green recipes, rank 1. Your difficult blue, rank 2. Then you got purple complex at rank 3 and legendary yellow at rank 4. The second skill on the line, which is recipe improvement, that's the one that allows you to do the different levels of recipes. So that's just something, because I know I made that mistake. I think it was with this, and I think with alchemy, I think it works in the same way. We'll touch on that in a second too. But I remember putting my points into the wrong thing, thinking that I was unlocking higher level recipes, thinking I'd be able to level faster. That wasn't the case. So again, if you're just brand new to the crafting system, that's something to pay attention to, especially if you don't have an extra 20 skill points sitting around.
Also, something else that's worth knowing right now with quality, higher quality recipes do not give you more XP. So if you're crafting blue recipes, that will give you the exact same experience bump you would get from a green recipe of the same level.
That's a good call out there. But you would be wasting more supplies, is that right?
Yeah, usually they'll take more materials. That's another thing about the event recipes. A lot of them require unusual ingredients that aren't found in the provisioning list. So you could craft these things, but you're going to be using things from alchemy or from other disciplines, and that can be a real problem financially for you.
Yeah, that very much could. Also note that in the skill tree, there's a breakdown. So the gourmand is one that adds extra duration to eaten foods versus the connoisseur, which gives extra duration to consume drinks. So those are good things to spec into eventually because it will give you at max, putting 3 skill points into connoisseur, you're going to be adding a total of 20 minutes to the duration of a drink. Is it going to be a life or death sort of thing? No, but will it save you a few mats in the long run? Sure, yeah. And if you, at some point, you're going to have extra skill points, so it's worth it. You mentioned earlier, Stark, that there is the extra servings created, so that would be chef and brewer, again, respective to eaten foods versus drinks. But that at max, putting 3 skill points into brewer, you will create 3 extra servings of each drink, which is very nice. If you're someone that's running your... Did we talk about Ritz last week? I can't remember.
I don't believe so. I think we simply covered them in very basic levels.
So if you're going and doing your we told people to go out and get ready for them. That's what it was. That was our homework for you guys. So Ritz being when you're certified to do your daily quests for all these crafting things, if you have brewer or chef, the ones that make these extra servings, that will actually save you some work potentially in the long run too, because it might, it's going to make you're going to be required to turn in some of the same versions of an item. So that, they're going to tell you to go out and craft this drink. And whenever that daily quest comes back around, you'll probably still have some in your inventory is what I found. So
yeah, it's worth knowing specifically with this one, there's only 3 versions at each tier for the provisioning writs. So the most you'll usually end up with is total of 6 consumables in your inventory from provisioning writs. And at that point, the resource return for provisioning writs is just nuts, because you'll make a food item, you'll make a drink item, you'll turn it in. Now this will cost you a total of 4 mats, or 6 mats at endgame, I believe. I'd have to double check the recipes, but you turn it in, and you're given 20 materials. If you took these passives, so you took brewer and you took chef and you maxed them out, you're going to get 80 materials for making that set of food and drink, and then coming back in a couple of days when it's back around and turning those in and just keep repeating. So yeah, provisioning is absolutely nuts in that regard. It's a really good one, especially if you're looking at this buff system at all. And also the provisioning writs are really important because it's only one of 2 ways you can get the materials necessary to make the purple food and drinks. The other one is the maxed out hireling can return those once per day. Or actually, sorry, twice per day. It's every 12 hours. But if you don't have maxed out hireling, then the only way to produce purple food and purple drinks is coming out of the writs.
Stark, what's a hireling? Can you talk about that?
That's another passive. Yeah, that's another passive. So the hirelings, we didn't talk about those at all, did we?
No, and they're one of my favorites.
And the irony is I think this is the last time we'll have the option to, because there's only 5 hirelings.
Yeah, you're right.
These are passives in the equipment skill lines and provisioning that will return you a selection of materials each day. And at the highest tier, that will reduce from a 24-hour cooldown to a 12-hour cooldown. In the case of provisioning, there's unique stuff on that list that you can't get elsewhere, or at least couldn't, until they were added to the writ system. So it's very useful to have. You log in, you get free crafting mats, you dump them in your craft bag if you're USO Plus, and you don't have to worry about them ever again. And it's really convenient. It's nice.
Yeah, and as a brand new player, I mean, this is something that's really going to help you. So I'm trying to think when I usually start spending a point into hireling. Maybe around, probably for me, just strictly in my play style, it might be closer to level 15, level 20 is usually when I get a point in there. It doesn't take me too long to get to those levels, but that's when I feel like I've got enough skill points usually coming in that I've got my damage spells and stuff picked out already. I've got my damage passives, but getting hireling early is a good thing, especially if you're new to the game, because it is free supplies coming into your mail, and when you're new, you can't say no to free. I mean,
yeah. It's worth noting that with the others, with the equipment ones, you can get the legendary upgrade materials out of those hirelings. They're fairly rare, figure about once a week, maybe once every 10 days, but they can still drop. So that can also be a resource when you're trying to work on getting to end game content. You can start getting those materials and stashing those away and eventually have enough to upgrade gear.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what it is. Because when I go to upgrade gear, I'm like, wow, I have gear upgrade supplies. Great. Well, I didn't seek these out, so someone, the provisioner, the hireling probably sent it to me, or I got it off of turning writs in.
Oh, one other thing that pops up with all the hirelings, I don't know if you've looked at this, they have the most hilarious mail chains.
Yes, they do, and I've not read them all, unfortunately.
Yeah, I still need to read the last provisioning one, but they each have 100 messages that you'll get, and then it'll transition over. So there's a total of 300 for each skill line. And they tell their own little stories. Some of the stuff is really funny. It's worth taking a look at and reading if you haven't yet.
I wonder, does someone have those collected online, I bet?
Yeah, UASP does.
Oh, goody. Because I would like to see those someday. So what Stark's talking about is whenever they mail you those supplies, every 24 or 12 hours, respectively, on your level, you'll get a little message. I remember seeing the provisioning one. Like, I found these apples for you along my journey. Here they are. Blah, 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 blah. Cool stuff.
Well, the first woodworking hireling is now the guy that runs the crown crates. So,
What?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Pacruti was the woodworker hireling originally.
Oh, that's an interesting little Easter egg there that I had no idea about. I don't know if that's an Easter egg, but...
There's a couple of little gags where characters from the hireling mails, not the authors, but other characters associated with it have popped up in various places.
Huh. One last thing to bring up for provisioning is that food and drink in the world that you find will be of white rarity. So that's the worst of food that you can get and use. Green food is what you are going to be probably using a lot at lower levels. It has a larger and a longer buff time than white. Blue, on the other hand, a bit higher. It's going to boost 2 stats. So that's actually something that is considered pretty effective at higher levels. Even, if you start doing dungeon content at the end, blue food is very acceptable to use in there. Purple recipes are going to buff 3 stats. However, one thing to note, and I kind of glossed over this a second ago, but the more stats that these things are buffing, the less the value is. So for example, if you have a blue food that buffs your maximum magicka and your maximum health, and then you have a purple food, like Witch Mother's Potent Brew, it will buff your maximum magic, your maximum health, and increase your magic recovery. That sounds like the one to go with, obviously, right? Well, their trade-off is that they have reduced value, so that max health, max stamina is actually going to be a little bit lower than the blue food. Trade-off being that you're getting a 3rd stat buff. Stark, do you have a preference of kind of how you handle this sort of thing?
It varies. The important thing there, you actually skipped one other piece that came through, because Witch Mother's Brew is not... it's not a food, but it's also not an end-game food.
Oh.
It's not an end-game drink. It's an event recipe.
True.
So it scales from level 1 to 160. And the event recipes take an additional penalty. They're very good when you're leveling up because they will always be at the right level. But at endgame, it's going to return slightly lower than a hypothetical identical recipe would at 160. There's some special cases, and we mentioned event recipes that were really popular. That's one of them, because there is no way to get both a max stat and a max recovery buff on a food outside of scaling recipes.
Wow.
So if you compare it, if you compare one that raises all stats, it's a scaling event food, or even the Crown Store one, to one of the normal tri-stat foods you'll find at endgame that are 150, what you'll realize is the numbers are actually reduced. There is actually a stat penalty on it. You can see the same thing with green recipes from events versus identical green recipes that occur naturally as part of the base game. But what you're seeing here is, yes, the stats drop off based on, does it scale and how many stats does it modify? And this is part of why the blue recipes are so popular at endgame, because they represent a nice middle ground between I get the stats I want, but it doesn't buff a stat I don't care about, and I get a larger buff than I would if I was using a tri-stat food. Now, you brought up Witch Mothers, and that is a popular one because if you're making a Magicka build and you're having issues with sustain, it buffs your recovery. It makes sustain easier. The same thing's true of stamina. Dubious Camoran Throne is extremely popular for stam builds because it buffs health, max stam, and stam recovery. Even though on paper it's almost as bad as you could get because it's buffing 3 stats, it's a scaling food because it's from an event. But at the same time, those 3 stats it scales, you can't get that from someplace. That it buffs, you can't get from someplace else. So because stam has a harder time with sustain, it's a very attractive option for a stam build.
Wow. So interestingly, provisioning is not very straightforward in a way. I guess I say that because I mean you're not gonna destroy your character by choosing the wrong option. I mean, as long as you have something that you can see is clearly different stats, it does get confusing because if you do make the mistake that I've done, I say that in jest, of looking up all the foods, there are about 1 billion of them in the game.
Yeah.
I think that's a conservative number. I don't know what the best rule of thumb to give out to someone is other than, maybe when you're looking at some guides at some point, kind of really trying to refine your play style, you can either A, test out different foods and see how they affect you in the field, see if you find that you're having personally better results with them. Or you can kind of take a look at, like I said, some of the builds that you see online. I'm looking right now at one of Alcast's Healer Templar builds, which is recommending Witch Mother's Potent Brew, interestingly enough, or the Clockwork City food there, which is very expensive. The Clockwork City
that requires
citrus
perfect
fillet.
row.
Yeah. And so I guess that's kind of a thing. Maybe it does boil down to like choose what works best for you, or what's your kind of go-to advice?
To experiment with what you can get your hands on.
Very good. Because another thing is going to be sustaining the ingredients, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you've got a fantastic recipe that will do what you need. This is the Clockwork Citrus, by the way, that you just mentioned. If you have that and you're like, well, this is perfect for my build, you've got to realize that every time you craft that, you're using 10,000 gold worth of mats.
No thanks.
So, yeah, that might be the right choice for you, but you do probably want to consider, can you afford to use it?
Yeah, and so I guess that brings in even a deeper question. This is just for everyone out there listening individually. What content are you running? Do you need to be running the absolute best food on your character? Is what you're doing kind of, dare I say, like a joke at the moment? You're way geared to do whatever you're doing, and so you want to choose something that's going to be a little more conservative on your finances. I think, like Stark just said, you got to just experiment with it on your own. But it is a fun crafting section. Like, I like provisioning overall.
Yeah. It's also one where you can't really screw up long term because your food buff will expire in about 2 hours at most. So anything you've done now can be fixed later. Yep.
Also, maybe a silly thing to say, but still could be useful to someone out there. It feels silly now, but you can only have food or drink on, not both. So you do choose, just to be clear, that you're not doing a food and a drink at the same time. I remember finding that out pretty early on in the game, but still being like, oh, I thought I could have both. Nope. Up next, speaking of drinking, we got alchemy. Chug those potions. Alchemy is probably ultimately my least favorite one to talk about. So, Stark, I'm going to rely on you to talk about this one because I find alchemy requires me to actually think, and we know I don't like that.
The funny thing about alchemy, because we just talked about with provisioning how you could max it out in no time. Alchemy and enchanting, alchemy and enchanting are the two easiest crafting skill lines to complete. Not just max them out, not just, get the skill to 50, but complete it in every respect. So alchemy should be instantly familiar if you've played another single-player Elder Scrolls game, any of them. They've been using some variation of this system since at least Morrowind, and possibly before that. It's select 2 alchemy reagents and mix them together and see what you get, if you get anything. Now, the one difference is you will also be including either a water or a poison base. And that will determine whether or not what you're making is a potion or a poison and the level. Beyond that, though, it is really just straight up the same system you've seen in the single-player games. There's a limited number of alchemy mats in the game, so you're not collecting this huge, expansive list of mats that extends forever. Most of them are fairly equally difficult or easy to obtain, depending on what you're going around and doing. Some materials will come from killing animals of various types. For example, beetles have beetle scuttle, which Kyle has probably seen me chase after with a psychotic fury of a man possessed. And some of it comes from plants in the environment. So, yeah, it should be an entirely familiar system overall. The difficulty is it actually asks you to mix the ingredients together until you find out what they do and learn how to make potions or poisons. And that's where the problems come for you, isn't it?
Yes, and mine gets to that higher level of doing kind of writs and things. So I don't know if I want to bog us down with it. But my current issue is that the ones that my writs are asking for, apparently my guy doesn't know or doesn't have the right thing. And so he keeps mixing ingredients together and gets the wrong result. And just like, bah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's one other thing. If you're using either an online game, using an add-on to do it, you can learn every ingredient effect in almost no time.
True. So
if you're working around and you're not trying to experience this as exploration in the first person, then go for it. You can unlock all the traits. All you need to do is combine them once and get a positive response. So you can actually completely max the skill line in under an hour. Not just get it to 50, but also unlock every trait. The only ones that would be a little bit difficult on that are the new ingredients that were added with Somerset. There's a couple, and those are still somewhat more expensive. But yeah, it can quickly be learned. And then the irony is, once you do know it, you'll completely forget what you were trying to do later. I have been in the situation where I've gone to it and like, oh yeah, no, right, I don't have the add-on available. Whoops. Yeah, it is very useful though, because so your alchemy, your potions, if you haven't used any in game and paid attention yet, have a 45-second cooldown. The potions themselves have an effect that won't last that long. However, if you are using one of the passives in that skill line, it will extend the duration out to 47 seconds. So in some cases, with some builds, you're actually going to be selecting things like increasing your weapon damage and increasing your weapon crit. And you're going to be chugging those things every 45 seconds to maintain those buffs indefinitely.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I've not seen that before, but maybe I'm just not playing at that level.
It's expensive. This is one of these things where, depending on what you're doing, this might be worth considering. It's something you usually see in vet trials and sometimes see in PvP, where you're actually stacking them against themselves so that you're keeping uptime on your potion buffs. And those are the two big situations where every little advantage counts. If you're running vet dungeons, even DLC dungeons, that's probably a little bit expensive for what you're going to get back. And if you ever wondered why PvPers were talking about how they're always out of money, this is a big part of that. They're using potions constantly in combat.
Wow. I cannot imagine. That is astronomically expensive, I would imagine.
Yeah, it works out to be a couple of $1,000 a minute.
Oh my God.
No. It works out to be about a couple of $1,000 over 5 minutes.
And all the poor players like me all screamed out at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little bit too conservative with my money for that. It's not going to happen. We should shout out though that there is there's a chemistry passive that you can spec into. Its base level produces 1 extra potion or 4 extra poisons per crafting attempt, and its highest rank that is 3 extra potions, 12 extra poisons per crafting attempt. Yeah. So
worth noting that when you're crafting poisons, it starts at 4. So when you've got it maxed out, you're actually making 16 with each attempt, not 13.
Oh, that's confusing. Oh, 4 extra. Yeah. The same. We should clarify that for the food too, because you are.
Yeah, that's true for the food also.
Yeah, it's the when you read the skill, those are in addition to what the base is already crafting. So good call out.
Also, with alchemy, it's almost as deranged. You can craft poisons that you slot onto your weapons. These will temporarily suppress your enchantments on that weapon, but they will add far more complicated buffs than you could obtain through enchanting, including things like being able to drain resources off your opponent. Like you actually get resources back, and they have increased costs on that.
Wow.
You can heal yourself. You can apply DOTs to the target, including a DOT that actually scales with Man-at-Arms instead of Thaumaturge. It's considered direct damage. You can also reduce the target's weapon damage or spell damage while increasing your own. There's a number of things, and it is something worth poking around, finding out what you can do. Also nice with the system, even in the base game, when you know what the traits will be on a recipe or on a combination of ingredients, you will be able to see the preview of what you're creating. So if you're looking at it, you can tell what these two ingredients will do to each other, the reagents. That is there once you've learned them. Until you've learned them, they're all question marks, and you're sort of sitting here going, well, what does this do with this?
Makes sense. I also have to call out a correction here. I said when we were doing provisioning that skills that you want to be looking at the second skill in the list to level up or to get higher level provisioning items created. I said the same for alchemy, and that's not true. Yeah, I was thinking enchanting. Solvent proficiency, the first one that you're speccing into here under the alchemy tree, that's the one that's going to allow you to use different waters and craft higher level potions and poisons.
A little harder to see here, but alchemy has the same behavior as provisioning in regards to additional effects. So when you put 2 effects on something, it will reduce the overall potency of each. But because there isn't color coding in the UI, it doesn't appear to be there. So it could just look like, oh, hey, the number went down. It's the same mechanic, though, same concept even. When you're applying multiple effects across a variety of spectrum, instead of just applying a single effect, it'll be slightly more diluted on each one, but the overall value is significantly higher.
That's interesting. I didn't know that about alchemy. I guess I should figure it would work in the same way, but see, that's something I've never really got into. I guess I don't craft many potions or poisons for myself. Maybe an aspect of the game I need to spend a little more time on just to see if I do like it.
It's very useful, especially being able to custom craft your own potions, because when you're getting to endgame content, unless you're in specific roles, being able to pick what buffs you get is very good. And it will give you buffs. You can sometimes get them from other skills. For example, the one that I mentioned, the buffed weapon damage, that's going to conflict with things like momentum or the Dragon Knight ability that enshrines your weapons in flames and provides a weapon damage buff, because it is applying major brutality. But at the same time, if you're not getting major brutality, or you know you're going to be getting it from your potions, it's very useful. Also, your poisons, if you use that same combination, will provide you with minor brutality while reducing the target's weapon damage. I think it's maim, but I'm not 100% certain. So there's some real value in there in messing around and finding out what these things can do.
I might have to go experiment. Another thing I have to learn more about, Stark, I feel like there's a lot of unknowns in this next one for me too. Enchanting. It's fairly simple when you look at it. You know, you're crafting glyphs so that you can enchant armor, adding things like extra magicka and such to your gear. But there's some trickier things at maybe the gold tier. And maybe we can talk about this at a later time. But enchanting's a fun one to get into. Do you want to talk a little bit about the starting of enchanting?
Well, enchanting is actually a lot more simple than it looks. So you have 3 glyphs. You have an aspect glyph. That'll determine the rarity of the item. Mm-hmm. You have a potency glyph, which will determine the level. And you have a green glyph. I can't remember the name all of a sudden. Yeah. That will determine the effect. The green ones have 2 modes, a positive and a negative mode. And then your potency will determine which one is active. At that point, it's just looking at the glyph that you've got, so the green one, and identifying which aspect it's going, or which potency it's going to take, whether it's going to take a positive or a negative potency. And the ones you mentioned, for example, the ones that increase health, magicka, and stamina, you can put those on armor. If you put the negative ones on, those go on weapons, if I remember correctly. So that's where you get your drain enchants that will return those resources to you.
Oh, okay.
Depending on what it is, what the specific one you're looking at is, it will become either a weapon enchant, an armor enchant. There's only 4 armor enchants total, or a jewelry enchant. And so looking at it, you're going to have to, until you know what the potency does, right? And until you have those runes translated, all the runes involved translated, you're not going to know exactly what you're going to get out of a glyph. But as with alchemy, it's one you can completely finish in a single sitting if you have if you have all the mats on hand. Also, you only need a single Hakejo rune. You don't need multiple ones just to learn them all. This is a difference from alchemy, because you only need to use a rune successfully once. You cannot misuse it, and then you will have that word translated. So you can max this one out with shocking speed if you have mats on hand. And if you can run all of these, because you just need to mix stuff together where you don't know what it does, and then you will learn that word. Now, actually leveling it up is a little bit harder because that relies on being able to deconstruct large numbers of runes. This is the only consumable crafting skill line that does include deconstruction. So this is a little bit weird, where it's a little bit like the equipment in that respect. So you can find a bunch of runes, a bunch of glyphs while you're running around playing the game, and you can crunch those down and get crafting XP from them. You'll even get some materials from them. And as you're going, and as you're crunching these up, if you stockpile them, you can potentially just simply max out a skill line in a sitting, especially if you're doing it on an alt character where you can afford to make green and blue glyphs to crunch. So you can go through quickly. In this case, your rarity, when you're deconning and when you're crafting, the rarity of the item, so the green, blue, purple, gold, that matters. And as with every other skill line, the level of the item matters. And there isn't even a situation where you've got ones that are scaling between different levels. Like there's no equivalent to the event recipes with a specific rune that just scales across levels. You need to avoid it. Nothing like that. So you can follow some of the basic approach from alchemy actually specifically from alchemy to learn as many words as possible. And you can max this one out very quickly. Now, the hard part is remembering what those words actually do. And if you've translated them, you can simply preview it. You can simply go in and plug the stuff together, and the negative and positive potency runes are usually somewhat self-explanatory because their translated names will be something like add and subtract, or improve or decrease, stuff like that. So it should be pretty obvious when you're looking at that specific combination with that specific set of runes, what they're going to do. And the essence runes will be pretty reliable as well, because it'll be something like fire or magicka. I think you can guess what both of the enchantments coming off of magicka are, can't you?
Wait, why? No, I can't.
Okay, that's going to be the one that increases your magicka on your armor. Or if it's negative, it will give you your magicka steel on a weapon.
That's what I couldn't figure out. I knew the first, but okay, so I've never used the magicka steel on a weapon before.
It's
interesting.
There. Yeah.
Because that's the case where I go with, it's like I can think, okay, most of my gear has magicka added to it, but I usually go with things that add like a shock value or some shock damage sort of thing, something like that. I guess I've never used magicka steel.
Yeah, so with shock damage, if you take that same elemental, like the same element glyph, the same essence glyph, sorry, and wow, I'm screwing the terminology here. I'm sorry.
Maybe I do.
Take the same essence rune, and then instead of putting a positive potency on it, you put a negative potency on it. What you'll get is a piece of jewelry enchantment that will let you reduce lightning damage taken.
Interesting. And you know what? Maybe I do use Glyph of Absorb Magic on my weapon. Huh. See, so what I've learned from this whole experience, and I wonder how many other people are doing it too, I've learned that even though I use this system to craft stuff, I don't know the system. Not like you do. It's very interesting to kind of be like, well, sure, I craft it and I put it on my gear and it works, but it's definitely something different to hear it and learn it like this.
Yeah. So I realize I've made it sound fairly complicated in some places. This is fairly straightforward once you get the hang of it. Because you're just looking at selecting your essence, okay, selecting your positive or negative, depending on what you want, and you want that to the level you're trying to make the glyph, and then selecting what quality you want it to be. So do you want it to be white, blue, purple, gold? I think we mentioned this last week, but it is kind of important to know you do not find gold glyphs in the wild, or at least I never have. Those are almost always crafted by players. If there is a source from them, it's something like the one of the higher tier rewards from people. But outside of that, you'll basically never see that. Something else worth knowing, that gear, because gear has an enchantment on it already, when it's dropped, doesn't have an aspect rune associated with its enchant. So, for example, if you get a blue piece of armor out of a dungeon and you upgrade it to purple, the enchantment follows.
Oh, okay. Yep.
When you put an actual enchantment on it, overriding that, then it has a permanent aspect tier applied to it. So at that point, if you look at this and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to put a purple glyph on this because I just upgraded it and I didn't realize this, and then later you go to upgrade it to gold, the enchantment will not increase.
Maybe that is answering the question that I very much mentioned at the beginning of enchanting. So I've seen a glyph that says, hey, this will add, so like let's say I make a gold glyph that's just adding magic into an item. And it says, I'm making this up, but add 600 magicka to whatever. And then I go to put it on an item, let's say a purple item, it will only add 300. Is that difference right there that's saying, hey, this could be 6? Okay. Then I have no idea what that is.
No, what happened there is you tried to put it on your belt.
I'm thinking headpiece.
Shouldn't be the headpiece. So there are 3 strengths of enchantments on armor pieces. I think it's 3. Your chest, your legs, your shield, and your head take the full value of the enchant.
Interesting.
Your gloves, belt, boots, and shoulders take a reduced enchant.
It could be shoulder because I'm thinking monster set here.
Yeah, it would have been the shoulder then. Yeah, because that takes a reduced. I want to say that's 50%. So the 300, like it would be 600. It's 300. So that's about right. I want to say belts and boots are even lower than that, but I'm not 100% certain. I know I think there's a third tier down. I just don't remember. But yeah. So what you can end up with is you can end up with 2 specific situations that result, or 3 specific situations that result in numbers you don't expect when you're looking at what the item actually turns out. The first thing is, like I said, some armor pieces are worth more than others. And when you're looking at the value of the enchantment, it will always report the full value of the enchantment until you attach it to an item. The second thing, and this isn't going to be an issue for armor, but your champion points will alter the amount returned. So if you're looking at your lightning enchant, you have the champion point that increases lightning damage. The number you see on the item will be increased. Same thing is also true if you're a dark elf or a high elf and you have a native lightning bonus. So you've got the passive increases your base lightning damage. That will show up there as well. So you'll actually see a higher number than even if you link the item to another player. So even if you're linking the item you're wearing to someone else, they may see a different number because their passives are being calculated instead of yours.
Wow. Okay. That makes sense.
The third one, and probably the most obvious one, but it's worth saying, is infused. If an item is infused, the enchantment will report 1 value, and then when you preview it on the item, it will be higher.
Interesting. Yep.
So those will all result in, you look at the glyph, you see the number on the glyph, you try to attach the glyph, and the number you get on the other side is different. It can be all 3 of those, and probably will be all 3 of those at one time or another.
I'm really glad you went into that because I didn't know those. Look at it. Podcast teaches me so many things. I'm so happy. Because I was wondering that while I was, because I would say that right now in the game is where I'm getting a little bit more into morphing or changing the traits on some gear. And then also applying glyphs to things more often. And so I was wondering, it probably would have been monster set shoulders that I was working with. And I was wondering why I was saying 600 and giving me 300, for example. So you taught me.
That's exactly what happens there.
Ta-da! So some pieces are weighted higher than other. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else we need to do for enchanting here, Stark? We are getting a little thin on time. I'm not sure if we want to spend some on Master Writs.
I think the Master Writ thing should go pretty quickly, actually.
Okay.
So, yeah. But yeah, nothing else comes to mind on enchanting. There's probably going to be questions out there, so there are certainly resources available. And these are some fairly complex systems that I'm trying to boil down as much as possible. But if you're still left wondering something, there are ways to get in touch with us and go, wait, what?
Yeah, exactly. Please do. And yes, these things get, as you get into them and you learn them, they'll start to make more sense. Again, I think I'm at that point of saying, okay, I've done it, but now what does that really mean? So, and very interesting to hear it explained like that, Stark. So Master Writs. Now, this is something I've touched exactly 0% of, except that I own them and have them sitting around doing nothing but collecting dust.
Okay, so your normal writs that you can do every day are just you walk up to a quest board, you get handed a request for something like, 3 pieces of armor or 2 pieces of armor and a sword, or, this specific drink and this specific food. And it's pretty simple. It's stuff you should be able to access. As you're doing writs, you have a random chance to receive what's called a Master Writ. This is a gold item. It's consumable. And when you use it, it will add a quest to your quest journal, just straight up into the journal. And it will ask for something a little bit more specific. So there's 7 kinds of Master Writs. There's one for each skill line. And what they request will in theory be an attempt to demonstrate your mastery of this specific craft. In the case of equipment, it's going to ask you to make something in a specific set with a specific trait at a specific rarity. So it's not just, okay, well, make me a piece of armor. It's going to be, make me a piece of armor of Hunting's Rage with divines, and it has to be gold or it has to be purple. Then you can turn around, you turn it in, you get what are called writ vouchers. This is a currency you can use at an NPC that will only appear once you started earning writ vouchers. Once you have writ vouchers on your account, either in your bank or on your current character. If they don't have access to writ vouchers, they can't see him. Or if they have one that's currently running, one of the quests currently running. So when you go to him, you turn them in, you get the vouchers. These will let you buy things like crafting stations. There's unique motifs. There's even a recipe, ironically, for provisioning, an XP recipe. Oh wow! So yeah, so what you do with these is you do the Master Writs, you get goodies, and it is a long list. It is something. Let's see what's there. It is worth your time if you're heavily invested in crafting already. And if you're not, most writs can actually be sold to other players for a reasonable amount of money. The exception is jewelry crafting because of specifics for how much it costs to make the jewelry crafting Master Writs. But if you get any of the other writs, those are absolutely worth selling to other players for a fair amount of cash, actually. The basic structure of the system is to be for committing into crafting, and it will require more time commitment. You won't be doing this stuff right off the bat. But it's worth knowing it's there. It's also worth knowing what these things are and why you do them. The big stuff tends to be back in housing, but it does include stuff you can't get otherwise, including the storage containers. Like, I know that Kyle has a sort of contentious relationship with them. I think I do too. But the vouchers are one of the ways you can obtain them without having to spend money. And this is also the one way to get crafting stations, like your alchemy, your blacksmithing, and so on stations for your house without spending money. It's either this or buy from another player who used this system. So
I need to get into them at some point, Stark. I just need to start collecting more motifs so that I can actually use the ones that I have.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, you're right. That is actually a part of the equipment crafting writs, because they will ask you for a specific motif.
So this can be you'll see very one where expensive.
It's like, yeah, it'll show you one where it's like, oh yeah, no, you can do this, and then you realize, wait a second, that motif page costs $20,000.
Yeah, so that's kind of been the thing that I've kept away from, or I don't want to, well, I guess just have avoided for the moment is, hey, I'm going out there, I'm collecting motifs as they come to me. Just as I got some from the Undaunted boxes we opened, things like that. So I'm just passively collecting. And I feel like if you want to get into Master Writs, you probably need to start semi-actively collecting them from guild traders and things like that, or going out and farming them. Because I think my problem is I might be able to do some of the Master Writs I have, but for now, I just store them in the bank, and there will be a day, and who knows, maybe it'll be a very happy day, and I'll go and I'll realize, wow, I've collected a lot of these things. I only need a couple more motifs, and look at all the Master Writ pieces or vouchers I'll get.
Yeah, something I stressed, I didn't point this out as much. I put a lot of pressure with enchanting and alchemy about how you can max out those skill lines. Mm-hmm. Now, the Master Writs for those tend to be pretty low. Alchemy, I think, caps out at 5, and I don't believe Enchanting can even generate a writ above 40 offhand.
Oh, okay.
But those two are very easy to max out to the point where you can do any Master Writ you're given.
Oh.
Provisioning is a little harder because there are, I believe, 10 specific recipes that appear on the Master Writ list. However, once you have those 10, you can do any Master Writs you get. Now, with provisioning, it's, again, I want to say its default is 2, and then the ones that require perfect row are now 40. But other than that, it's also very simple, very straightforward. So those 3, the consumables, are incredibly easy to get up and running for Master Writs. The trade-off is you don't ever see the exploding totals you see from the equipment writs. Because those are a lot more complicated. So when you're looking at an equipment writ, you'll sometimes see voucher values 300. It's nuts, and it's like, okay, well, I can do this item, but it's going to be something like it requires a 9 trait set, it requires a rare motif, it requires Nirn Hound, and it's an expensive piece to put together, but it's worth it. With alchemy and enchanting and provisioning, you're not going to see that kind of a return, but you will see something like, oh, hey, you need to concoct this specific potion combination, and then you'll get 2 or 5 vouchers for it. And it's just like, okay, well, I can go make 20 of this pot and come back and turn it in and get paid. And that's something where the only threshold to getting in is actually having the mats to make it.
Oh, interesting.
So that's part of the reason where it's like I was stressing, you can finish these skill lines, because with equipment, you need to do all the research and you need to do a lot of motifs for Master Writs, and that is simply not true in consumables.
Very interesting. I'm very excited to get into a little bit more of this, Stark, especially the consumable side of things here. Again, cannot stress enough how useful Craft Store is for all of this, really. I mean, it's going to keep track of where your research is for your gear making things. You can turn on that option that keeps track of which ones of your characters know what recipes. Does it track it does track motifs. It does, right?
It does track motifs, yeah.
So that's very ususeful too. That way, and
ironically, that was the thing that got me to use Craft Store originally, because I already had research completed. I already had an add-on that managed the recipes, but I couldn't track either furniture motifs or motifs. And then Craft Store came along, and I'm like, okay, yep, I'm going for that one.
Yeah, so if you want to start doing Master Writs, that's a good one. So if you're picking up a duplicate page or something, you'll know which one which ones you can sell. Even if you're on a different character, you don't need to manage that in your head. A lot easier.
Yeah, I also want to point out with the enchanting thing, this is Craft Store replaces the enchanting interface to one that is, I don't find it quite as user-friendly, but it is way more efficient and effective because it takes out the guesswork of what you're going to make.
Good point. It is, yeah, and for that way. And also, I think it did the same, it does the same thing we mentioned with when you're doing provisioning. You can tell it how many of an item you want to craft, and it will just auto-craft. So, if you're making some alts or something like that, it'll just pump out 5 of those magic glyphs that you want, or whatever you're looking for. So, a little bit less manual work.
Yeah.
honestly, I don't know how people do this stuff on console, Stark. I really don't. Like doing writs. Writs become so easy if you have lazy writ crafter, which we mentioned last week. I mean, it takes out so much of the guesswork, and maybe to a degree that really handicaps my knowledge. Like I can see that where, as I kind of mentioned when you were talking enchanting, I know how to do a lot of these things, but I don't know why or how they're working together. And that's probably a handicap due to the add-ons. But I think that really depends. I mean, certain people like myself, it's good knowledge, but I also, I don't know, the add-ons are just too helpful for me to pass up.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand that. Used to do when the writs were originally introduced, the craft store didn't exist. Lazy writ crafter didn't exist. I think it was about a year before that came along. And the answer was, how did you do writs back then? You didn't do writs, not on all characters.
Oh.
You would sometimes do writs on specific characters. And ironically, with provisioning and alchemy, it was really advantageous to just simply run those by themselves, because you can just go pick it up. You can go over, you can drop it off. That's a lot easier to plan for, but like equipment writs, it was not worth the time.
Wow.
Until you had until you had maxed out and you were actually doing the rubedite ones. And even then it was only useful for getting the glass style fragment page fragments, which aren't even a thing anymore. Those don't exist. Like I still have a stack and a half of them, but that entire mechanic got lifted out and the glass motif was put into the voucher system. So yeah, it's been changed. The other thing that used to do with provisioning used to be the primary method of getting, and still is the primary method of getting the Sigic Ambrosia recipe, because you get recipe fragments and you need to mix those together. I think that was the first time they did we'll take something valuable and break it into 7 pieces thing.
Oh, yeah.
But that came out of max level provisioning writs. So yeah, that's also useful. But back then it was just, I'm going to stick to a couple of writs that I know are going to be useful in return stuff, so primarily provisioning stuff. But this whole thing where it's like, yeah, I'm going to log on every character and do all 7 writs every day, and did not happen.
Huh. That is interesting information, because I can't, like I said, I can't imagine having done it. So I'm glad to hear that. Not just crazy. I mean, I guess that brings up the same thing for console players. Then they're probably not running them all every day, I imagine.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or if they are, it's like it is an extensive use of time. I do remember from the New Life, from the first Jubilee event, so the anniversary, where any daily would return. I was taking about 2 hours to do all 12 characters.
Wow.
So yeah, it was. Lazy Writ Crafter makes stuff go very fast. It smooths stuff out. It's great. It's very helpful. But yeah, what you used to do is you used to not do them. Oh, another thing from back then, and I'm sitting here thinking about it, realizing, used to be that there were specific drop-off points for each tier.
Oh.
So like if you were tier 1, you'd be in Velkelgard. If you were Dominion, you would be in Daggerfall. If you were Covenant, you would be in Davin's Watch if you were Pact. If you had split tiers, like you had some that were tier 1, you had some that were tier 2. Tier 2, like so tier 1, you turn it in Davin's Watch. Tier 2, to go to Mournhold. Yeah, you did not do that.
Oh, that's nightmarish. No.
And then for tier, I want to say starting at 6 through 10, you would actually go to Belkarth and Craglorn. So that was the spot you were working with. And then when Orsinium came out, that was moved to Orsinium for the tier 10. I think the tier 9 stayed in Belkarth. So what happened was you wouldn't run them, or you'd run the ones you could get in a specific city and turn in a specific city, and you wouldn't run them elsewhere.
Wow.
It is vastly improved now from then. Like, I'm talking 3 years ago, and today it's like, oh yeah, this was the hell that I lived in long ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth.
No, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so do your writs. That's a very different statement today than it would have been, 3 years ago, because we would have thrown things at you if you'd said that.
Yeah. As a reminder, you guys, I will put the link for my crafting list of add-ons below. 2 others to call out just because they're relevant to today's episode, and then we'll let you go. But Daily Alchemy and Daily Provisioning are ones that you can just walk up to that station, and assuming you have that recipe, it will just craft the writs for you. So you just go up to it, it bangs them out, and you just walk away. So those are useful. I just set up kind of a redirect here, so you can do addons.kyledempsterstudios.com will take you to my list. But again, I'll have that in the link or the show notes below.
I suspect spec'd with daily provision, or not daily provision, with daily alchemy, you probably do want to have all of the available traits unlocked.
I think that's the case. Yeah.
Because I think that's what's tripping you up is you've got a blend of ingredients where you don't know what some of the traits are.
Yep.
And it's trying to create something out of that it's like, this should produce something, and it doesn't.
Yep.
So that's probably what's catching you there.
I think you're totally right. So now I just have to figure out which things I don't know yet. So,
crafted potions is a really good one for that, because I mentioned that earlier, but if you just run that without any search parameters, by default, it will return unknown potions at the top.
Oh. Huh.
So you can filter through that and very quickly learn what you don't know.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm learning things again. Well, you guys, I feel like that's enough learning for everyone for this week. We'll leave you with all of that information about provisioning, alchemy, and enchanting. Reminder, mark down your calendar. The Trevor Project charity stream is December 22nd. New Life starts on December 13th. And don't forget to get your friends into the game. You have one day left, maybe two potentially, to get them in for the free play weekend. Also send some crowns around to people so you can get that Snowcat Griffin that'll be coming out on January 4th. Stark, that's going to do it for me this week. I think we should probably let them go. Oh, check out Twitch, twitch.tv/Kyle Dempster Studio. You'll probably find us both there hanging out and BSing, both in Discord and in chat there. We also have a guild. I should shout that out. Got a lot of people joining the guild recently. A lot of streamers in the guild. So if you want to be part of that community, just come hang out on Twitch. I'll get you a link to that. Otherwise, I think that's it for this week's episode. Thank you, Stark. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with me and teaching me so much that I didn't know that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone. See you next week. You have a great week until then. Bye-bye.
Take care.